The midday sun streamed through the cafe windows, casting warm rays on the polished marble floors. The air hummed with gentle chatter and the rhythmic clinking of spoons. At a small table, Josh sat with a cappuccino engrossed in a well-worn paperback.
Your coffee, sir?
A young waiter approached, his tray trembling slightly. Josh glanced up, smiling. "Josh, thanks, man." The waiter retreated, flustered, as Josh took a sip, oblivious to the admiring glances around him. The cafe door chimed, drawing all eyes to the newcomer. Selena, a striking woman in her late 20s, entered, commanding attention. Her raven hair and piercing green eyes set her apart from the elegantly attired patrons. She moved with confidence, her lips curved in a knowing smirk. The women in the cafe instinctively recognized Selena as a threat. She bypassed vacant tables, locking eyes with Josh.
Josh, are you always this oblivious, or do you just enjoy making women fall for you?
Josh chuckled, intrigued by Selena's question. He set his book down, eyes twinkling. "Josh, what are you talking about? I'm just a normal guy."
Yeah, sure, and I'm an innocent nun. You have no idea, do you?
Her gaze lingered on him before meeting his eyes again. Josh, no idea about what? Before Selena could answer, whispers intensified as a group of women leaned in conspiratorially.
Oh, she's bad news. Just wait, he'll find out soon enough.
Josh frowned, catching snippets of whispered conversations. He turned to Selena, but she touched his arm lightly.
Don't mind them, they're just jealous.
Her touch sent a shiver down his spine. Josh, right, just jealous. He leaned back, trying to regain composure.
Let's get out of here. I know a place with stronger coffee and more interesting conversation.
Josh hesitated, then nodded, intrigued by the mystery she presented. The proposition hung in the air, charged with unspoken energy. Josh knew he should decline but felt drawn to Selena's allure. He met her gaze, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Josh, lead the way." Josh stood, leaving his half-finished coffee behind. As they walked out, her hand on his arm, he felt a thrill of anticipation. He had no idea how right he was. Days melted into nights as Josh was swept away by Selena. They explored hidden corners of the city, each date an adventure. Selena had an uncanny knack for knowing what he wanted. He found himself falling for her, drawn to her laughter and intellect. For the first time, he felt truly alive. He ignored the nagging voice urging caution. He was content to lose himself in their whirlwind romance. The whispers started subtly, like rustling leaves. Friends greeted him with forced smiles and knowing glances. At first he brushed it off as curiosity, but as the whispers grew louder, doubt took root. He noticed the way people stiffened when Selena entered a room. He tried to shake off the unease, attributing it to his insecurities, but the whispers followed him, a constant reminder that something wasn't right. The first crack in Selena's facade appeared on a warm summer evening. As they walked through a park, Josh noticed a group of women staring at Selena. One woman whispered something that made her companions gasp. Josh stopped, unease washing over him.
What was that about?
He searched Selena's face for an explanation.
Don't mind them, darling, they're just jealous.
Her touch felt cold and calculated, devoid of warmth. Unease blossomed into suspicion as Josh lay in bed. He couldn't shake the image of the woman in the park. A message notification flashed on his phone. "She's not who you think she is." Another message followed. "Run while you still can." He sat up, mind racing. Who was sending these messages? What did they know about Selena? He glanced at her sleeping form, wondering if the warnings were true. The cryptic messages gnawed at Josh's peace of mind. He scrutinized Selena's every word and action. There were moments when her confidence wavered. He noticed her hesitation before answering questions, and the phone calls, always ending abruptly when he entered the room. He longed to confront her but feared what he might uncover. He remained trapped in uncertainty, torn between doubt and love. One evening, a familiar face appeared in a crowded restaurant. It was the woman from the park, her back to them. Josh felt a cold shiver as he watched her. He couldn't hear her, but her animated gestures were unmistakable. He tried to focus on Selena, but his mind was elsewhere. He wondered who the woman was and what secrets she held. He knew he couldn't let this opportunity slip away. "I need to use the restroom," Josh mumbled, pushing back his chair and rising to his feet. He didn't wait for Selena's response, his mind made up. He had to know the truth, even if it meant risking everything. He strode across the restaurant, his heart pounding in his chest, his eyes fixed on the woman with the fiery red hair. As he approached their table, he noticed that her companion was a man, his back to Josh, his head bent close to hers as they spoke in hushed tones. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to proceed. He couldn't very well barge in on their conversation, but he couldn't bring himself to turn back either. He stood there for a moment, frozen in indecision, as the woman's laughter washed over him, sending a shiver down his spine. Just as he was about to turn and walk away, the man shifted in his seat and Josh's blood ran cold. It was Damien, Selena's ex-husband, the man she had supposedly left behind without a second thought. What was he doing here? And what was he whispering about with the woman who seemed to know so much about Selena's secrets? Josh's mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. But the more he learned, the more confusing it became. Josh stood there, hidden in the shadows, his heart pounding in his chest as he listened to Damien and the red-haired woman's conversation. Every word they spoke was like a hammer blow to his gut, shattering the carefully constructed image he had built of Selena. He learned that she had not left Damien, that they were still very much together, their separation nothing more than a carefully orchestrated charade. He learned that the woman he loved was a master manipulator, a woman who used her beauty and charm to get what she wanted, leaving a trail of broken hearts and shattered lives in her wake. He learned that he was not the first man she had ensnared in her web of deceit, and he would likely not be the last. He listened as Damien boasted about their elaborate plan to fleece him, to drain his bank account and leave him with nothing but a broken heart and a mountain of debt. The red-haired woman, he learned, was Damien's accomplice, a woman who had once been a victim of Selena's manipulations and was now seeking revenge. She had been watching Josh, waiting for the right moment to expose Selena's true nature. And as he stood there, hidden in the shadows, Josh realized that he had been played for a fool. Section 5. The mask slips. A surge of anger coursed through Josh, hot and fierce, replacing the numbness that had settled over him. He had been betrayed, manipulated, played for a fool by the woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted with his heart. He wanted to confront them, to expose their lies and deceit, but a part of him knew that it would be pointless. Selena was a master manipulator, a chameleon who could talk her way out of any situation. No, he would have his revenge, but it would be on his terms. He would play their game, pretend to be the clueless fool they took him for, but he would be one step ahead of them. He would make them believe that their plan was working, that he was falling for their lies, and then, when they least expected it, he would turn the tables on them. With a newfound resolve, Josh straightened his back and smoothed down his shirt. He took a deep breath, composing himself, and then he stepped out of the shadows, a cold smile playing on his lips. He approached their table, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence that had descended upon the restaurant. He could feel their eyes on him, curious, expectant, unaware of the storm that was about to break. A hush fell over the restaurant as Josh approached Selena's table, his footsteps echoing across the polished marble floor. The clatter of cutlery and the murmur of conversations faded into the background, replaced by an expectant silence that crackled with tension.
Darling, what brings you over here? I was just telling Damien about our wonderful trip to the museum. He's so interested in Impressionist art, aren't you, darling?
Selena looked up from her plate, her carefully crafted mask of surprise failing to conceal the flicker of unease in her eyes. Damien, caught off guard, choked on his wine, his face turning a delicate shade of crimson. Damien, still sputtering, managed a weak smile and a curt nod, his eyes darting nervously between Selena and Josh.
To love, lies, and other artistic endeavors.
The red-haired woman, her composure seemingly unshaken, raised her glass in a mocking toast. Josh ignored them all, his gaze fixed on Selena. "Josh, we need to talk." He pulled up a chair from a neighboring table and sat down, his body language radiating an icy calm that belied the storm raging within him. He could feel their eyes on him, curious, expectant, unaware of the bombshell he was about to drop. Josh said, his voice soft but deadly. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into Selena's, watching as the color drained from her face. "Josh, I know about you and Damien, about your little scheme to fleece me." The air in the restaurant crackled with tension as Josh's words hung in the air, silencing the room. Selena's carefully constructed facade crumbled, her eyes widening in shock and disbelief, her lips parting in a silent gasp. Damien, his face now ashen, pushed back his chair, his hand instinctively reaching for the steak knife resting on his plate. "Josh! Don't try it!" Josh warned, his voice cold and hard as steel. He met Damien's gaze with a steely stare that dared him to make a move. Damien hesitated, his hand hovering over the knife, his bravado melting away under Josh's unwavering gaze. He slowly lowered his hand, his face a mask of defeat.
Who told you?
Selena whispered, her voice hoarse with a mixture of fear and anger. She glanced at the red-haired woman, her eyes narrowed in suspicion, but the woman sat back in her chair, a smug smile playing on her lips, enjoying the spectacle unfolding before her. "That doesn't matter," Josh said, his voice cold and dismissive. "What matters is that I know the truth about you, about the lies you've spun, the lives you've destroyed." He stood up, towering over them, his gaze sweeping over their faces, each one etched with varying degrees of guilt and fear. "You're not the woman I thought you were, Selena," he continued, his voice filled with a mixture of disappointment and disgust. "You're a fraud, a con artist, a heartless manipulator who preys on people's trust." He turned to Damien, his gaze like ice. "And you," he spat, his voice dripping with contempt, "are nothing but a pathetic pawn in her twisted game." He could see the fear in their eyes, the realization that their carefully constructed web of deceit had unraveled, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. But he felt no satisfaction, no sense of triumph, only a profound sense of loss and betrayal. The woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted with his heart, was nothing more than a figment of his imagination, a carefully crafted illusion designed to lure him into her trap. A slow clap broke the silence, echoing through the stunned restaurant. Josh turned to see the red-haired woman standing, her hands still pressed together, a look of admiration in her eyes. She walked towards him, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her movements fluid and graceful.
"Bravo," she said, her voice laced with amusement. "You played that perfectly." She stopped in front of him, her eyes locking onto his. "You had me fooled for a moment there," she confessed, a hint of mischief in her voice. "I almost started to feel sorry for them."
Josh raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. The woman smiled, a slow, predatory grin that sent a shiver down his spine.
"You really have no idea, do you?" she purred, her voice low and conspiratorial. "This whole charade, this dramatic confrontation, it was all part of the plan."
Confusion clouded Josh's features. "Plan?" he echoed, his brow furrowed in bewilderment. "What plan? Whose plan?"
The red-haired woman chuckled softly, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "Ours, darling," she purred, leaning closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Yours and mine."
She placed a hand on his arm, her touch surprisingly warm and reassuring.
"You see, Josh," she explained, her voice taking on a conspiratorial tone. "Selena and Damien may be masters of deception, but they're amateurs compared to us."
She gestured towards the stunned couple, still frozen in their seats, their faces pale with shock and fear.
"They thought they were playing you, using you for their own greedy gain. But we've been one step ahead of them from the very beginning."
A slow smile spread across Josh's face as he began to understand. The cryptic text messages, the orchestrated encounters, the whispers and suspicions, it had all been a carefully crafted illusion, a play within a play designed to lure Selena and Damien into a false sense of security, to make them believe they were in control when, in fact, they were nothing more than puppets dancing on a string. "But why?" Josh asked, his voice still tinged with disbelief. "Why go through all this trouble? What do you get out of it?"
The red-haired woman's smile widened, a hint of steel flashing in her emerald eyes. "Revenge, darling," she purred, her voice laced with a chilling satisfaction. "Selena made the mistake of crossing me once a long time ago. She destroyed my life, my family, my future. I swore I would make her pay, and now, thanks to you, that day has finally come."
She gestured around the restaurant, now buzzing with hushed whispers and startled gasps, as the other patrons began to realize they had front-row seats to a real-life drama.
"This little charade," she continued, her voice rising slightly above the din, "was just the beginning. Selena and Damien are finished, socially and financially. Their reputations are in tatters, their secrets laid bare for all to see. They'll be lucky if they can even show their faces in this city again."
Josh watched in stunned silence as the red-haired woman, her eyes blazing with a cold fire, orchestrated their downfall. She moved through the restaurant with the confidence of a seasoned conductor, her every word, every gesture calculated to inflict maximum damage. She whispered damning secrets to the gossiping patrons, leaked incriminating details to the restaurant manager, and even managed to alert the authorities to Damien's shady business dealings. Selena and Damien, their faces pale and streaked with tears, made a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, but their denials were met with scorn and disbelief. The carefully crafted facade they had built around themselves crumbled, leaving them exposed and vulnerable to the wrath of the crowd. They were let out of the restaurant in disgrace, their pleas for understanding drowned out by the jeers and accusations of the other patrons.
"It's over," she said, her voice filled with a chilling finality. "They got what they deserved."
She turned to Josh, her expression softening slightly.
"And as for you, darling," she murmured, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "I believe we have some unfinished business to attend to."
The red-haired woman, her true identity still a mystery to Josh, led him out of the restaurant and into the waiting chaos of the city streets. She hailed a taxi with a practiced ease, her movements swift and decisive, as if she had been planning this escape all along. As they sped away from the scene of the drama, the city lights blurring past the windows, she turned to Josh, a mischievous glint in her emerald eyes.
"I believe congratulations are in order," she said, her voice laced with amusement. "You just pulled off the greatest performance of your life."
Josh, still reeling from the whirlwind of events, could only stare at her in astonishment. "Josh, but what about Selena and Damien?" he stammered, his mind struggling to catch up. "What about their money, their schemes?" The woman threw back her head and laughed, the sound rich and melodic, echoing through the confines of the taxi.
"Gone, darling," she purred, her voice filled with a wicked delight, vanished into thin air. While they were busy basking in the glow of their imagined triumph, we were cleaning out their accounts, transferring their funds to a secure offshore location.
She leaned closer, her breath warm against his ear.
"Let's just say that Selena and Damien won't be seeing a dime of their ill-gotten gains ever again," she whispered, her voice a husky promise. "Consider it a parting gift from yours truly."
As the taxi deposited them in a quiet, secluded neighborhood miles away from the drama of the restaurant, Josh turned to the red-haired woman, his mind still grappling with the events of the evening. He had walked into that restaurant a love-struck fool, blinded by Selena's beauty and charm, only to emerge hours later, his illusions shattered, his heart bruised but unbroken. "Josh, who are you?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "And how did you know?" The woman smiled, a sad, wistful expression flitting across her features.
"Let's just say I'm someone who knows the high cost of trusting the wrong people," she replied, her voice laced with a quiet understanding. "And as for how I knew, let's just say that a woman scorned is a force to be reckoned with."
She extended her hand, her touch surprisingly gentle.
"It was a pleasure doing business with you, Josh," she said, her voice warm and genuine. "I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other again."
And with that, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows, leaving Josh standing alone on the sidewalk. The city lights twinkling around him like a million tiny reminders of the night he had faced the darkness and emerged, bruised but unbroken, on the other side. As Josh hailed another taxi, his thoughts turning to the future, he realized that sometimes the greatest lessons in life are learned not from our triumphs, but from our heartbreaks.